Hey everybody, Alex here from Treza Labs. So I wanted to kind of give a quick overview of what we're building here at Treza. So Treza is really privacy infrastructure for the future of finance. We're enabling secure, verifiable computation using trusted execution environments. And we'll kind of get into what a TEE is. I might reference it as a secure enclave. Those two things are kind of interchangeable. So we talk about the problem. So in a standard cloud environment, think like AWS, sensitive data, think like private keys, API keys, user data, financial logic, it's all kind of vulnerable during processing. Simultaneously, you have a lot more regulatory friction these days. So think like stricter global regulations like GDPR, financial compliance, KYC, AML. All of that makes it really difficult to process this user data without exposing it. And there's also very high complexity if you want to have a good security posture. So leveraging, trusted execution environments and hardware encryption, it all requires kind of this specialized low-level knowledge that slows down the development process. Not to mention, all of the infrastructure today is kind of fragmented, right? We might be running things in AWS, Azure, GCP, we might suffer from kind of vendor lock-in and kind of wasted engineering hours. And so we're trying to solve this by building what we think is this universal privacy infrastructure. So we're trying to simplify security. We're building kind of a unified platform to deploy applications in these hardware protected enclaves with really zero specialized knowledge required. Also, the really cool part is all the benefits you get from doing so. So you get a bunch of cryptographic guarantees, hardware rooted proofs that essentially assure that the code that you're deploying in these enclaves remains completely private, even from the cloud provider, the infrastructure provider that you're deploying it on. And we'll get into kind of why that is useful later in the presentation, but this is really the unlock that we think is most important. We're building a developer-first product here. You can deploy your standard Docker containers. Really, we like to think if you can containerize it, you can secure it with Treza. We are cloud agnostic, so it's a write once, run anywhere type of model. We're essentially a private compute layer for all of the major cloud providers. So let's talk about how it works. So first, you want to containerize your application. So developers would package their application, say it's an API model, an AI trading bot, what have you, into a standard Dockerized container. So you would containerize your application. You would then deploy it to Treza. The platform handles all of the VPC setup for you, creates all the security groups and all the encryption automatically. And then you would execute it, right? So the app then runs inside of this secure enclave. You can think of this secure enclave again as this isolated execution environment with memory encryption. You then get an attestation on the backend. So every job produces a digitally signed privacy attestation, call this a proof, that is verifiable by any third party or on-chain function or contract. So let's talk about some of the key products and features that we're building. First and foremost, we're building private compute enclaves and a platform around deploying and provisioning those. So you can deploy and provision microservices, APIs with total confidentiality. We're also building on top of that this kind of reactive execution framework, this orchestration-like framework that is really event-driven and has support for webhooks and autonomous agents. We're also really leaning into kind of zero-knowledge KYC solutions. So we're building a mobile app and a set of smart contracts and SDKs that can be used to verify things like user identity. Think like age, nationality, date of birth, any type of on-chain action without really ever exposing any of the underlying personal data. And we think this is a paradigm shift from the traditional kind of Web 2 based database model where you might be storing really private information inside of a database that then exposes you to a bunch of risk. And all of this is wrapped up nicely in a nice developer SDK with simple abstraction layers to kind of remove some of this complexity. And so if you think about the use cases for a platform like Treza, really, the obvious use case is something like Web3 and DeFi. So, if you're building a Web3 application today, DeFi application, an exchange, a wallet, you're likely going to need to do secure key signing and some private transaction processing. And so, we allow via these secure enclaves to do that in the most secure way possible and really give you that table stake feature, the ability to kind of do that in an easy, compliant way. Another really useful application is AI and machine learning. So, running autonomous agents and inference models without exposing any of the proprietary weights or user prompts. One of the bottlenecks or kind of hurdles we see today with large organizations is they might have a bunch of proprietary data, but they don't necessarily want to run that on a cloud instance or certainly not a foundational model. And so running that within kind of a private, isolated environment gives them a certain amount of privacy protection that they might not get from running in a traditional, say, EC2 instance on Amazon. Another obvious use case is healthcare, so doing like HIPAA data compliance, processing of patient data. And the one that we are most excited about probably is what we like to call kind of cryptographic compliance. So kind of meeting any strict financial regulation with cryptographic proofs of data protection rather than a traditional security audit that you might do via a third party. Let's talk about the market opportunity here. There's really three pillars of kind of change that we see in the industry today. This adoption of kind of confidential computing. It's a rapidly growing market. It's about a $15 billion market today. It's expected to grow to about 30 billion by, I think, 2030. We also see this kind of privacy first movement online. You see increasing demand for ZK applications in both blockchain and traditional finance. And then lastly, AI security, like we touched on earlier, there's a critical need for infrastructure that really protects these AI models and this, intellectual property. So if we get into the business model, really it's a very simple kind of usage-based pricing model. We like to think of ourselves as an infrastructure as a service platform. There's tiered pricing. We have a standard kind of self-serve, pay-as-you-go type of computation, where essentially you're paying an hourly rate for these enclaves. And then we have kind of an enterprise-based white glove model where you can think, custom SLAs, dedicated support, multi-region deployments, where we work closely with startups and enterprises to kind of help them build out their confidential computing stack. And then there's one that we're kind of exploring, and this is kind of on-chain verification. So if you think about compliance and more precisely kind of KYC and AML checks, these tend to run for every transaction that might be happening on a blockchain or via an exchange. And so if we could take a fee of every transaction and provide a service of this kind of ZK verification, that would be a great revenue generation model for us. So let's quickly get into the roadmap. So we're building out kind of our core infrastructure today. This is kind of establishing the foundational trusted execution layer, supporting all of the major cloud providers. We're also building out kind of this production-ready zero-knowledge KYC system via smart contracts and SDKs, and also a plug-and-play kind of mobile framework. Kind of more in the near term, we're looking at kind of advanced verification and kind of on-chain integrations. So being able to kind of deploy these hardware rooted cryptographic attestations across really all providers and all kind of smart contract-based chains. In the future, we can kind of see Treza as really this enterprise scale regulatory standardization, right? So thinking of Treza as more of a full stack compliance technology for things like SOC 2, HIPAA, MiCA, KYC, AML, and really, securing some kind of strategic banking enterprise contracts that really drive mass adoption for privacy-preserving financial infrastructure. So that's it. Thank you for joining us today. If you're interested in learning more, you can go to trezalabs.com. You can also email me at alex@trezalabs.com. Cheers.